All right, let's just get straight into it. 11 billion Swiss francs. That is the literal jaw-dropping estimated revenue Rolex generated in 2023. To put that into perspective, we're talking about crossing the 10 billion US dollar mark for the very first time in their history. I mean, it's a number so massive, it kind of defies comprehension, right? Especially when you remember we're talking about mechanical watches, gears, and springs. So how exactly does one single company reach these astronomical heights?
Well, welcome to this explainer. I'm super excited you're here with us. Today we're going on a deep dive into the financial and, honestly, the psychological playbook of the world's most successful watch brand. We're going to decode the anatomy of a titan, looking at exactly how Rolex built an empire that doesn't just exist in the luxury market, but practically dictates the whole thing.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The undisputed watch king. 2. The science of brand equity. 3. Defining the Rolex target. 4. The economics of exclusivity. And 5. The Swiss watcher battlefield.
All right, part 1. The undisputed watch king. So, according to the highly respected Swiss Watcher report by Morgan Stanley and Lux Consult, the sheer scale of Rolex's operation is just undeniable. Get this, out of hundreds of Swiss watch brands out there, Rolex alone captures just over 30% of the total retail market share. Think about that for a second. Literally, 1 out of every $3 spent on a Swiss watch goes straight to the crown. And they're pulling this off while producing an estimated 1.24 million watches a year. So they're moving massive volume, but somehow they still maintain this total aura of scarcity.
Zooming out a bit, let's look at the big 4 privately owned brands. That's Rolex, along with Cartier, Audemars Piguet, and Patek Philippe. Together, these absolute titans now capture nearly half, 49%, of the entire Swiss watch market. It's an incredibly fascinating consolidation of power right at the very top. Scale, brand equity, and tightly controlled supply are basically allowing a select few private companies to completely run the table.
Moving on to part 2, the science of brand equity.
To really understand how Rolex captures that massive market share, we have to look at the customer-based brand equity model, or CBBE. This was originally introduced by K.L. Keller back in 1997, and honestly, you can consider this Rolex's secret playbook. The core idea here is that a brand's true power lies in what's living inside the minds of its customers. Rolex's success isn't just about, making a great watch. It's meticulously crafted to trigger a highly favorable emotional and cognitive response from the consumer.
Take a look at this brand equity pyramid for Rolex. Right down at the base, you've got brand salience, basically making sure Rolex is literally the very first name that pops into your head when someone says luxury watch. Moving up, we see this perfect balance of performance and imagery. They're delivering unmatched quality and those legendary continuous self-winding features, while simultaneously acting as the ultimate status symbol. Then, right at the very top is resonance. This is where Rolex achieves a highly loyal clientele that feels a really deep, personal attachment to the brand. They've perfectly balanced the physical quality of the watch with the intangible feeling it gives the person wearing it.
And all these elements combine to build what is essentially an impenetrable fortress, held up by 4 core pillars. First, you have unbreakable brand loyalty, both behavioral and cognitive, where people see Rolex as their absolute go-to option. Second is massive brand awareness, which is fueled by their brilliant global event sponsorships. Third, deep-rooted brand associations that link the watch to personal standards and desirable social standing. And finally, unshakable perceived value. Because Rolex prices at a premium, buyers expect exceptional design and artistry, and well, Rolex delivers. Put all that together, and you've got a massive barrier to entry for any new brand trying to steal their crown.
All right, part 3, defining the Rolex target.
Rolex is super methodical about who they target, breaking it down into 4 distinct groups. It actually starts with pure utility, pilots and divers who demand high-quality, multifunctional, precision tools. Next, it scales up to transnational travelers, people constantly crossing borders, who really rely on time accuracy and dual-time functions. Then, from functional utility, the brand shifts over to pure lifestyle. They target artists, royal families, and aristocrats who use a Rolex as a clear marker of their elite identity. And finally, it captures watch appreciators, those tasteful, mature consumers who are just drawn to the incredible craftsmanship in the brand's enduring high-end positioning.
That brings us to part 4, the economics of exclusivity.
Okay, the relationship between Rolex's brand valuation and their actual revenue is absolutely fascinating. Take 2020, for example. Their revenue actually dropped pretty significantly, down to $5.1 billion.
But check this out. The brand's valuation didn't drop at all. In fact, it climbed to $7.9 billion. It's crazy, right? Even when revenue fluctuates, the perceived value and the sheer equity of the Rolex brand just continues to march steadily upward.
So how on earth do they maintain that valuation? Well, it's through a very strict premium pricing strategy. Rolex executes an average annual price increase of about 8%, with some of the more popular models seeing jumps of up to 10%. Now, you might think a price hike like that would push buyers away, but it actually does the exact opposite. These steady price hikes stabilize prices in the secondary market. They basically reinforce the idea to the consumer that buying a Rolex isn't just an expense, it is a rock-solid, value-preserving asset.
Another absolutely brilliant stroke in their economic engine is how they handle production and sales. They keep them totally separated. Rolex relies on industry-leading retail partners to actually sell their watches. What this means is that Rolex itself doesn't have to worry about the massive, super expensive inventory burdens that constantly weigh down their competitors. It keeps them agile, highly profitable, and entirely focused on what they do best: manufacturing and marketing.
Now for our final section, Part 5, the Swiss Watcher Battlefield.
When we zoom out to look at the broader industry context, the reality is actually pretty stark. Since the industry volume peaked back in 2011, right after the 2008 financial crisis, overall Swiss watch production volumes have literally been cut in half. By 2025, total volume plummeted down to just 14.6 million units. The entire industry is producing significantly fewer watches today than it did over a decade ago.
So, with production volumes totally plummeting, where is all the money coming from? Well, we're seeing a massive structural shift toward what analysts are calling premiumization. Get ready for this stat. Watches priced over 50,000 Swiss francs represent a microscopic 1.4% of total production volume. Yet, they drive an unbelievable 89% of the industry's growth value. Let that sink in. The entire industry's growth is basically hanging on the sale of ultra-expensive timepieces to a very, very exclusive clientele.
And this reality creates a huge contrast in the market. On one side, based on Morgan Stanley estimates, you have ascending private titans like Rolex, Audemars Piguet, and Patek Philippe. They are aggressively capturing market share and pushing up sales. On the flip side, you've got publicly traded conglomerates like the Swatch Group, navigating a much tougher environment. They're dealing with sliding volumes and market share challenges for some of their core brands. It is a highly polarized battlefield out there right now.
Which leaves us with this final, really vital question. With overall industry volume shrinking by 51% and future growth relying almost entirely on this ultra-luxury premiumization, who is actually going to survive the next decade of the Swiss watch wars? Are the private titans going to completely monopolize the space? Or can the broader industry figure out how to adapt to this new, highly exclusive reality? It is definitely something to think about the next time you glance down at your wrist. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.